Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live at Lunchtime Volunteer Training. Today, we are going to be talking about spay and neuter, one of our favorite things at HSMBA. So, this was originally supposed to be last Wednesday, but I was a little under the weather, so that's why we're doing it today instead of the fourth Wednesday. So, this topic is a little better than the last topic from the last live at lunchtime. So, Will is probably going to kill me if he sees this photo. Just a backstory, this is Abuletta in the picture. She was your typical Chihuahua, a little feisty, and she got really attached to one of the front desk girls at the time. But when we were finally able to handle her enough to get her out into spay and neuter surgery, we thought it would be fun. And maybe this isn't funny. I guess if you had to be there, we thought it'd be funny to make it look like she was biting Will and not able to do surgery to kind of tease that staff member. She was asleep. No, she did not bite. But when I was doing spay and neuter recovery, I tend to take a lot of photos just because some of these guys are so funny when they're waking up from anesthesia or when they're in their kennel and they got their face smushed into it and they're pretty funny. So I used a lot of those photos for this training. But if you know HSMBA, you know Willie. This is a fantastic capture of Willie's unique personality. He's fun. I started doing spay and neuter recovery in 2019, and I did it all the way up till February of this year. Um, the only reason I stopped was because the location I moved to made it extremely inconvenient to try and be there on time. So that's where we made some changes. But spay and neuter surgery was and will always be the best thing. I loved it so much. I loved doing it. It was, just really fascinating. So, we're going to talk about spay and neuter today. So, these are the stats that were pulled for all of the dogs and cats that are adoptable from 2015. And I cannot remember now without looking again what month that started in, but it was in towards the end of the year in 2015. And feral cat program, the TNR program, didn't start until the end of 2016. So that is why those numbers are so low. And then the 2025 numbers are going to be through the end of September. So we still have October, November, December to add to those numbers. But I did want to include them just so far so you can kind of see where we're at this time without October, November, December numbers. So it's a lot of animals. So since starting spay and neuter clinics at HSMBA, we have spayed and neutered over 16,000 dogs and cats. And those are adoptable dogs and cats. That's not including ferals. Feral cats is another 8,500 cats. It seems like a pretty incredible amount of pets to have spayed and neutered. And the craziest part, I guess, about that is, this is the numbers that came through the facility and actually received the surgery. How many more are out there? And can you even imagine how many litters of puppies and kittens would have been added to the stray pet population had those, what are we looking at, 25,000 animals not been spayed and neutered? It would have been so out of control. We would have been in an area now that would have been completely uncontrollable. So this is pretty impressive, and we will continue to spay and neuter every pet that comes into our shelter and is not reclaimed. So when a pet comes in and it gets reclaimed, if that pet is not altered, that is an owned pet. So if they are reclaimed, we can't legally spay and neuter a pet. It's only after that stray hold where it officially becomes our property, for a lack of better words, that we can actually go through with spaying and neutering. So pretty impressive numbers. Some of the health benefits of spaying and neutering pets is going to be The biggest one is eliminating risk of cancer. So, of the cancers that can be more significant in unaltered pets, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, I think the most common one that we probably see in the shelter is mammary cancer. It's those female dogs that have had multiple litters of puppies. You know, they might be maybe 5 years old or a little bit older. Pretty common to see this in these older female dogs, especially the more litters they've had, the higher the chance of getting it. And then testicular cancer in male animals. It prevents infections. We do see pyometras in unaltered females when we're doing spay and neuter clinic. It is the uterus filled with a green liquid. It is extremely unpleasant. It will cause death. It's a mess. A terrible way for a dog to live is with pyometra, and it won't take long, but it will be painful, and it's just not even worth it. It reduces prostate issues, and it promotes a longer life in general. So studies have shown that altering your pets increases their lifespan, which is, I think, one great reason in general to spay and neuter, in addition to all the others. And this is just the health benefits here of spaying and neutering. The behavior benefits of it, it's going to reduce roaming and aggression. So a lot of times, especially in male dogs, you'll kind of see, and I hate to use the word aggression, but they tend to have more of an alpha personality. They like to control the other dogs that are around them. There's usually a lot of mounting, males or female, other dogs being that. They're just very dominant. With the roaming, they're always trying to get away. Whether it's out of the yard or out on walks, they're always trying to go find their little girlfriend. So this really helps keep them at home because they no longer have that desire to go out and look. It also prevents a lot of unwanted behaviors. The female dogs going through heat cycles. It can be messy. It's stressful for the females, stressful for the males if they're around the females. With the males, a huge problem with unaltered males is spraying and marking. Um, I hate that. I won't have it in my house. It's just terrible. They feel like they need to mark everything, even if they don't have to go to the bathroom. They're still gonna spray. They're still gonna mark. The spraying is more in cats, whereas the marking is in dogs, and it's just not an ideal situation. Um, we tend to see also that the older the pet is before altering it, the more likely those behaviors are actually going to become ingrained in them. So the earlier you spay and neuter, the less risk of that being an ongoing behavior issue. So for me personally, my cats have all been spayed or neutered at maybe 4 months at the absolute latest, except for one who I brought home at 8 years old, and he was neutered at the shelter at 8 years old. He will spray. So he spends a lot of time outside just because he prefers that. We live in the country. He's usually chilling on the back deck, but if he comes in the house, I really have to watch him. Now, my other cat that's a male that was, neutered as a kitten, no issues whatsoever. And I've seen the same thing with dogs. I have a dog that is was about 3 years old at neutering. I have one that was about a year old at neutering. The year-old one does not mark. The 3-year-old that was neutered, he still continues to mark if I don't catch him. So I have to keep an eye on him too. So the sooner you do it, the better it is overall. And it also creates calmer pets. They're not trying to get out and roam. They're not trying to do anything crazy behaviorally. They're really a lot calmer. They're more content. They tend to show more affection to the human. So behaviorally, it's definitely Definitely beneficial getting them altered. And then as far as community benefits of altering pets, um, big one, preventing accidental litters. You know, it's the really the only way to try and reduce the stray pet population. Um, we're overcrowded all the time. We're not the only shelter. This is a problem nationwide. We are overcrowded. A lot of shelters in the north may not have as bad of overcrowding in the south. That could be due to, you know, them not making it through winters, whether it is due to cold or a lower amount of available food sources. Either way, in the South and most of America, we have a huge stray pet population. Shelters are overcrowded. We don't have room. I can only imagine what percentage of the country fosters for a shelter, but I'm sure it's a rather high number. So, when these guys are spayed and neutered, it's going to take some of the stress off of not only all the shelters, but us too. We don't have to worry about these guys being born in a shelter or coming in at a very, very young age, some only days old, and growing up in a kennel. That is not how a puppy or kitten should be brought into this world, is by being raised in kennels. Okay, so in addition to that, it reduces public nuisances such as, you know, stray dogs barking or cats, digging up gardens and stuff. I know a lot of people complain about that, their yards getting dug up by stray cats, vehicle accidents, and a big one, potential spread of disease. The more pets you have roaming around that are unaltered, they're probably not up to date on vaccines either. Okay, so it's often kind of hand in hand when you fall short on providing proper medical care for your pets. If you're not vaccinating, you're probably not altering them either. Now you've got them running around and making them susceptible to parvo, distemper, panleuk. So it really becomes a big issue quick, and that's how outbreaks happen. So this is just kind of a visual. It's insane to even consider this. But in the span of 2 years, a single cat can produce 100 kittens. That's one single cat in 2 years. So if that's a single cat in 2 years, you're looking at about 50 kittens per year per cat. You've seen that we've taken each month. We are taking in and spaying and neutering tons. I mean, we're talking roughly 1,000 a year, a couple thousand a year. So can you only imagine if each, and reduce that by 50%, make it an even male versus female, can you imagine how many more animals would be out there and would be coming into our shelter if they in fact were out roaming and able to reproduce at this rate? It's terrifying. And then at 4 months old, these cats are ready to start reproducing themselves. So you got a 4-month-old kitten, and it's 7 or 5 brothers and sisters. Now they're reproducing too, and this is how it happens. This is how it escalates so quickly, because they can start reproducing so early. So what we're seeing now in the shelter, it's October, it's puppy and kitten season all over again, even though we just had it in March, April. Well, that's because now everybody's able to reproduce. So any of those pets that were babies in March, now they're able to reproduce. Now we're getting their babies, and it's multiplied just in that 4 or 5 months since we originally started taking in the babies for the year. And this is one of our cats that came into the shelter and decided to have her babies in her kennel. So this is not uncommon either, just because a lot of times when we do get a pregnant pet in, the stress of the environment will put them into labor, whether they're ready or not. So we've had cats that have given birth very early and they just don't make it. They're not fully formed, not fully developed. So it's it's a horrible thing to have to see. And yes, when they're born and they're born healthy and full term, it's a relief. But at the same time, now we're looking for more fosters, even though we may have not had enough fosters for the previous cats we still have. It just turns into a bigger and bigger issue every time another litter is born into homelessness. So for the dogs, pretty similar thing, really. So in 6 years, you can get 67,000 puppies from a single female dog. That is your female dog having a litter, that litter having litters, those litters having litters. It's ongoing. It's insane. And you don't really realize the impact until you kind of look at these numbers and see how quickly it escalates. You know, they're not humans where the typical littering is one. You know, they can have multiple. It can be one, it could be 11, 12, 13. So spaying and neutering has huge significance in keeping the stray pet population down. So some of the myths regarding spay and neuter, some of them are kind of funny. A very common one, people think that spaying and neutering their pet makes them obese. That's not true. It might slow their metabolism, but with a healthy diet, regular exercise, they're going to be just fine like any other pet. Maybe with the roaming of a an unaltered male, maybe if they're not going out and running the streets all the time, yeah, maybe they are going to gain a little weight, but it's probably because you're feeding the same amount of food, with it having less activity now that it prefers to stay close to home. You can modify that, just decrease the food amount. The surgery itself does not cause them to automatically explode. So another myth is that it's going to change their personality. I mean, it's not going to change, the personality as far as why you love them. Yes, it will reduce unwanted behaviors such as spraying and marking and things like that. But usually the behavior it does change are things that you do not want. Whether it's the added aggression or dominance issues, whether it's the roaming, the marking, the spraying, like nobody wants that. So as far as how it acts, is it loving? Does it like to do certain things in regards to play, stuff like that? It is not going to change the pet whatsoever. So health and reproduction myths going on. It's better to have a female pet, or I'm sorry, it's better to let a female pet have at least one litter first. That is something I've heard so many times, and I wish I knew who started that, because how many animals were born and ended up in shelters based on that idea. There is no evidence that that is going to reduce any kind of health issues later on in life. Not true. Has nothing to do with it. I don't know where that myth originated from. Get rid of it. It's not true. This is a good one. And I think in my experience, I've only heard it come out of a man's mouth, a male pet owner. But worrying about the pet's masculinity if he gets neutered. Dogs and cats have no concept of gender, okay? Neutering a male pet has nothing to do with that whatsoever. This is a human thing. No, it nothing to do with that, okay? I don't know. I think that's maybe a male thing to kind of, I don't know, maybe males tend to be more attached to things, so maybe that's how that myth transpired. No, it's not real. No, animals mate to create. Okay, it's completely about that. It has nothing to do with any kind of preferences. That's just not true. Another myth: my indoor cat doesn't need to be spayed or neutered. Or I've heard People with small breed dogs, well, my dog doesn't go anywhere. Well, it, it doesn't have to be just about them getting out and, getting pregnant or getting another pet pregnant. Like, you really got to look at the health benefits as well, health, behavior, um, not to mention, the roaming in general. If your pet is roaming, it could get hit by a car, could be picked up by somebody that thinks it's a stray, taken to a shelter, gets adopted out by somebody else, you never see it again. Maybe it's a really cute little dog or a little cute cat and they keep it because they don't know that there's an owner. Regardless, get them spayed and neutered. Yes, they might be at home all the time. My dogs are in the house pretty much all the time, and most of my cats too. They're none of my pets are ambitious enough to do anything. Maybe it's because they're spayed and neutered, but still, you can't dismiss the benefits in regards to cancer or disease, things like that. So it's just good. It's all around good. So moving on, some myths related to the cost or the risk of it. Um, Spaying and neutering is too expensive. I will say, in Como County, with there being, I believe, no low-cost spay and neuter clinics, yeah, this is actually fact. So in certain areas, you could say this is fact. However, if you go outside of your local area, there are low-cost options available. Okay, I've even seen in San Antonio where they have a sign up and they do free spay and neuters. I think it's once a month or quarterly each year. There's limited space on the list, but still keep trying, keep trying. Eventually you'll get on there, but there's other areas closer to New Braunfels, San Marcos, and things like that that have low cost options. So there is a way, there is options available for you to find to be able to have this done. And then spay and neuter being risky is not a fact whatsoever. I would imagine that spaying and neutering is the most common procedure done on animals as far as surgery goes. It is very quick. In the years that I have watched animals being spayed and neutered, it is extremely rare for there to be any issues. When an issue does arise, it's usually something in relation to, pyometra in the uterus, which again is due to not spaying females, or you never know on a stray pet specifically. We don't do blood work before spaying and neutering at our facility because I can't even imagine the cost that would entail to have that done. Now, if you go to a vet clinic, they will do blood work first because that way they're able to check for any kind of bleeding disorders or anything like that. Um, but even with us not doing blood work, maybe, I don't know, I want to say maybe one or two over the course of years have potentially had a blood disorder and maybe didn't make it through surgery. One specifically, I do remember being significantly older. So there could have been a lot of things that kind of went towards her not making it. But it is extremely rare, and we do thousands. So that's how rare it is when we only lose, a couple pets over the course of years. So it's extremely easy procedure. It's very quick. It takes about 30 seconds to neuter a cat, maybe about 3 minutes to spay cat or smaller dogs. Larger dog, maybe about 6 minutes. It's extremely quick. Okay, I think it takes longer to incubate and do all that stuff than it probably does to perform the actual surgery. So that shouldn't be something of concern. And even if in the past you spayed or neutered a pet and at a vet clinic and they didn't make it, it was probably something very specific to that pet and had nothing to do with the surgery itself. Again, maybe some kind of illness, disorder, something that you weren't aware of prior to the surgery. So it's extremely safe, extremely minimal. They heal very quickly. Don't let that be a reason to stop you from choosing spay and neuter. So at the shelter, I did create flyers with this information on it. They are either floating around by where the volunteer sign-in is, or they could be on the door still for the foster coordinator's offices. But I have compiled a list of several places that will do low-cost spay and neuter surgeries. Preventalitter.com, from what I hear, is one of the most low-cost options available in the New Braunfels area. So that website, preventalitter.com, they may have a waiting list, they may not. I'm not too familiar with these options, as I haven't used any of these. I believe, aside from my pets that were actually spayed and neutered at the shelter because they came from the shelter, I have not had to neuter or spay anyone since I lived in El Paso. So I'm not familiar with any of these areas, but there's a lot of options, you know. So definitely look into it, because I think the benefits far exceed anything else. In fact, I can't think of a single reason why you wouldn't want to do it, unless you are breeding, which is a topic I'm not going to get into, because, you know, we have plenty of animals, but to each their own. But I do really think that spaying and neutering not only saves lives, it's going to just help all the animals that are already in our care, the ones that are going to continue to come into our care. The more animals that are put out into this world, the less chance there are for the ones that are already alive and well to find a home. So spay and neuter, you know, share with your friends, spay and neuter. If you're not going to do it in regards to breeding reasons, do it for behavior or health reasons. So that is the end of that. If you guys ever have any questions, you know, you can always reach out. I will post this onto our volunteer resource page on YouTube, so you guys can watch it anytime you want. My email is on here in case you need to reach out, but you should have that already in your inbox from weekly updates and things like that. So I do get asked pretty frequently, sometimes older volunteers, most of the time it's new volunteers that are coming through, whether or not we do spay and neuter services for the community, and we do not. We are on contract, so the only animals we are allowed to spay and neuter are stray pets. We are not allowed to do spay and neuter surgeries on owned pets, okay? I wish there was a close option in New Braunfels that, you know, I could send you to, but maybe one day a bunch of the local vets will kind of come together and create a solution for that. But for now, you have those other options available. Like I said, there is the flyers available for you guys too. So thank you guys for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time I'm at the shelter.